What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Kamen Rider Build episode 32. This episode is called Program Tragedy, and the episode overall was pretty good. It finally gave Ryoga the information that he needed to know about his origin, which is important, and we learn a little bit more about that. We also get to see some interesting stuff with Gentaku, and also it seems like things are just getting even more intense regarding the war, and there's things between several different characters. Like, every character has something going on pretty much in this episode, in a way, but like nothing is big except for Ryoga. I mean, everyone else has like things here and there that are important, but it's not like anyone's as significant this episode other than him. Maybe Rogue, I guess you could say, was also pretty big this episode, just because things are getting interesting with his story now, and certain developments are happening that are very important to his overall story that will continue to get even more interesting as the story goes on. So anyway, let's get started with the episode itself. The episode begins with us seeing that, as we know, the previous episode, Mizura and Sawa ended up finding out about the origins of Ryoga, and the thing is that eventually Sento and Ryoga end up going to the Totuo Institute to hand over the Pandora's box to the Prime Minister, basically saying that this could be used as something to maybe stop the war. And the thing is that the Prime Minister is not really in favor of the way that they came about getting the Pandora's box, but at the same time, they're still grateful that they have it. So that's something that's kind of brought up a bunch of times, and at the same time, Sento doesn't understand from his perspective as to why he feels that way. So that's all brought up. In the meantime, what we do end up seeing is that eventually Sento and Ryoga end up heading back to the cafe, but while that's happening, Kazumi decides to stay behind, mainly because he ends up getting a call from Utsumi, because Utsumi ends up having to offer a trade deal, which is a deal that's very hard to, not take, yet at the same time, he is tempted by it, but he doesn't go through with it in the end. So that's a very interesting thing to consider, because, the situation that does end up occurring, it's definitely one that's a bargaining chip that could really pull him towards, giving up something very important right now, but he goes against that, which is smart on his part to do that. Now, at the same time, what we do end up seeing is that when Ryoga and Sento arrive back at the cafe, Sento ends up seeing the information that Sawa dug up about Ryoga's origins, and what ends up happening is that Sento basically blurts out the exact truth about Ryoga, and Ryoga doesn't believe it. He finds all sorts of excuses, and the thing is that Sento basically tries to back up why you are not human, and the fact that your power is similar to Bloodstark's. So that's very important to consider, of course, that there are those similarities and connections, and he does learn of the fact that Sento learns that his father was the one that did research on Ryoga, and all that and more. So eventually Ryoga ends up heading off, not believing and can't imagine that all this is true, that he can't be not human. He believes he is human. Yet at the same time, what we learn later on down the line in the story is that supposedly what might have happened is that when they ended up what ends up happening is that Sawa ends up finding some more information later on about who were the people that raised him. And the thing is that when they go to actually meet the people that raised Ryoga, what actually ends up happening is that apparently Sawa said that she showed the picture of Bloodstark, but as his human form, so Suichi. And the thing is that basically confirmed for her. I mean, that basically confirmed that because they know him, most likely what it's assumed to be is that supposedly, what was I going to say? That his memory was wiped, and that's the reason why Ryoga doesn't remember his past of being who he was, and also about all the experiments that he was put under, because that's the thing to consider. He doesn't have any memory of these experiments. He has only memories of everything following that in his life. So that's a very important thing, and it's similar to what happened to Sento when he went from being Katsuragi to being Sento. So that's a very interesting thing to consider. Now, at the same time, what we do end up seeing is that eventually the plan that we ended up seeing about Kazumi ends up happening, where we end up seeing Kazumi have the Pandora's box, and he puts it in a place, but he has the choice to go and give up the Pandora's box in exchange for rescuing those people that worked on his farmland in Hokuto. And the thing is that if he doesn't give it up, they could die. But he doesn't want to give it up because he realizes that if he gives it up, he's risking more lives than he would be if he risked just theirs. So in the end, he avoids giving up the Pandora's box. And what we end up seeing is that the Hokuto people basically defend Kazumi for his actions of not giving them for not giving up the Pandora's box. And then following this, what ends up happening is that Utsumi tells Rogue to finish them off. But what ends up happening is that Rogue ends up Gintaku ends up transforming into Rogue. He ends up doing this big attack, and rather than actually killing them or hurting them or anything like that, he frees them. And at that point, what ends up happening is that Utsumi is like, "Why would you do this? We have a chip still implanted in your body. You could be destroyed right now." And what happens is that Utsumi pulls that device. At that point, what ends up happening is that Rogue knocks the device out of his hand. Rogue then ends up beating up on two hard guardians that are with Utsumi, and then Utsumi finally grabs the device, presses the button. In this case, it doesn't actually destroy Gintaku. What actually ends up happening is that he ends up getting badly injured to the point that he de-transforms. So that's very important. I'm sure it has more to do with the fact that if you do it a number of times, it could lead to destruction. But again, we have to get to that point if that ever happens at all. For all we know, they may destroy the device before that ever happens, and so then at that point, it doesn't really matter. So keep that in mind, that is a very important thing to consider. So following this, what we do end up seeing is that Utsumi does beat up on Gintaku for doing what he did as well. And then from there, what we end up seeing is that Ryoga is still in denial about his past. And at the same time, we do end up seeing that there is an attack that occurs in the city where there are, what ends up happening is that Kazumi is met by those people that he cares for. They end up rejoicing, and what ends up happening is that suddenly he's called into action. So then at that point, Sento and Kazumi end up fighting the Washio Bros. And what ends up happening is that Sento uses rabbit mode. Then what ends up happening is he ends up using tank mode. When finally the Gear Engine Bro ends up losing in battle, so then the Gear Engine Bottle ends up going to the Remco Bro, and then they end up having Hell Bros, which leads to Kazumi fighting that, and then at the same time, Sento ends up heading off elsewhere. So all this ends up occurring. What we do end up seeing is that while this is all occurring, the Prime Minister of Totsuo ends up speaking to the Prime Minister of Saito, which really isn't the Prime Minister as we know, is really just Namba in disguise. Basically, the thing is that he's trying to stop the war, but the Prime Minister of Saito basically denies the plea to stop the war because he knows that the Totsuo Prime Minister would never use the Pandora's box because he knows how dangerous it is, and he's not that kind of person to use such a dangerous weapon, as opposed to the Saito Prime Minister, which would be way more willing to use such a dangerous weapon because that's what he's known for. Because it's Namba. Again, Namba is someone that's all about the heavy industry weapons and all that other stuff, so like he could use a weapon, no big deal. But as opposed to, say, the Prime Minister of Totsuo, never would happen. So in other words, his statement means nothing. They're just going to go in and try to steal it. Unfortunately, that is the case that they're going after. Now, of course, it's not like Totsuo doesn't have people that are defending it, but at the same time, the Totsuo Prime Minister speaking up doesn't mean anything, basically. Like, it's as if they said something and someone's just like, psh, like what? Like, who cares what you say? It's like you don't mean anything in this situation. You're basically a spokesperson here. You know what I mean? So that's basically what kind of occurs here. There's this whole situation about that. What we do end up seeing, though, is that eventually, Ryoga is sitting near the gravesite of his, fiance to be or whatever, the one that he cared for so much. And the thing is that, Kasumi. And what ends up happening is that he's reflecting on the fact that he can't believe he's not human and all that, and he still doesn't think he's human. But what does end up happening is that eventually he ends up being buzzed a number of times by Sento to join in the fight. And what we do end up seeing is that Gentaku and Bloodstark are going to be trying to find the Pandora's box. And we also see that Namba ends up talking to Bloodstark about, trying to conquer Totoro and all this stuff, and how they have to, but what ends up happening is that Bloodstark says, but we need to first get the ultimate driver, because that will lead to ultimate power, and we'll be completely overpowered, and we'll be able to handle the Pandora's box full potential at that point. So that's very important to consider. So what does end up happening is that from here, Bloodstark and Gentaku end up trying to head into the building. Gentaku is fighting several Totoro guardians, and at the same time, Bloodstark is also fighting them. So then, following this, Ryoga ends up transforming into his, Kamen Rider Cross Z standard mode, fighting against Bloodstark. In the meantime, Sento does end up arriving on the scene, watching as the fight continues. Eventually, what it does end up happening is that Bloodstark does confirm the fact that, yes, you have powers similar to mine, and that's why your hazard level is so strong, and, that's why things have worked the way they have. And the thing is that what this eventually leads to is that Ryoga basically says, I am a Kamen Rider, and I am going to fight for peace and love. And at that point, he ends up getting, fully determined and fully into it, where he suddenly transforms into Kamen Rider Cross Z Magma to go and fight Bloodstark. So we end up seeing that whole transformation. We end up seeing him do his Rider Kick attack with like the whole dragon bit that occurs, which is super cool. I love that whole sequence there. Kamen Rider Cross Z Magma is like one of the coolest designs the season has had, other than Rogue. Rogue is really cool. But yeah, no, these are really cool designs. What we do end up seeing is that he ends up beating on Bloodstark. In the meantime, you're wondering where Rogue is. Rogue is actually heading through the buildings trying to fight more Totoro guardians, and what ends up happening is that after they battle Bloodstark, who fades away and it's probably just a decoy copy of himself, what ends up happening is that they realize that they have to head into the Totoro Institute, where at that point Sento heads in there, and we end up seeing that Gentaku ends up grabbing onto his father and capturing him. And at that point, what ends up happening is that the episode pretty much ends there. Now, as far as things go in the preview for the next episode, what we do end up seeing is that Sento is going to get the schematic details and everything on the ultimate driver. What we're also seeing in the next episode is that finally Kamen Rider Evol will finally be introduced into the show. So if you're wondering when Evol is coming, and I know some people have been asking about that, Evil will be introduced next episode. So we'll finally get to see him in the show. They just released a full-scale image of what Kamen Rider Evil will look like in the show, because there was an image that showed up in early scans for the show, which, those early scans, you get an idea of what things will look like, but you don't get a proper, overall image, because, that stuff was shown off, I believe, at the end of last year. I think it was first being shown around November or December, maybe even a little bit more recently than that, maybe January. But think of it this way, if it was probably January, actually, now that I think about it, probably January, that's a 3-month period between now and then, which means that the design actually being seen is a whole other story. You can't just go off of that one thing where you see the scan, because the scan only gives you so much of an idea. And also we only got to see it from maybe the chest up, around here up. And the thing is that this basically showed from the head all the way to the feet. So like, you know, that's very important because now we actually see the entire costume and how the overall design looks. And it's really cool. We do see the Evo driver, which is very cool. And I can't wait to see how that whole thing will be done next episode, just because now we have Kamen Rider Evol, and there is going to be another form, I believe, for Evol. So if you're wondering about that, there is supposed to be a second form for him. It's supposed to be like some white form, like it has like a white look to it, and it's basically a powered up Evol form, which is like insane. You think to yourself, like, wait, like one of the most powerful riders for the season is going to have like this overpowered form afterwards. Yeah, that's supposedly going to happen. I believe that's right. There is supposed to be another form. I think he is, and I think also Rogue is supposed to get an additional form. And I just heard recently that it is confirmed, for those that are wondering, that people were suspecting at first that Grease wasn't going to get a second form. It actually does seem like Grease is going to get a second form. So if those of you that are wondering, is Grease going to be dead into this, did at some point in the season? No, he doesn't look like that's going to happen. It sounds like apparently in the last quarter of the show, which means sometime between probably June and September and like August, I would say. I would expect that he should be getting his final form. So that's very important to consider. Grease will get another form. I'm looking forward to seeing what that's going to look like, because I don't even know what they're going to do with Grease's design. I love his design, but I don't know what they'll actually do with it. I want to see what kind of special form they could give him, just because he's a really cool rider. I mean, I love Kazumiya. He's a really cool rider. So keep it in mind. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to know your guys' opinions about this episode. And are you guys looking forward to Kamen Rider Evol next episode? So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.